Horses, riders, performers and stars from all over the world have come here to Windsor Castle to pay homage to Her Majesty the Queen on her very special Diamond Jubilee. Good evening and a warm welcome to Windsor Castle and the Great Park on this very special night of celebration to mark Queen Elizabeth II's remarkable 60-year reign. As head of state in Canada, Australia, New Zealand and many other countries, and also as head of the Commonwealth, she commands an unrivalled worldwide allegiance, and this evening that will be perfectly demonstrated as 558 horses and 1,241 participants from 18 nations perform here at Windsor. Joining them in this unique setting are Susan Boyle, Il Divo, Rolf Harris, Dame Helen Mirren, Joss Stone and many more. So tonight we've combined Her Majesty's love of horses with a journey around the world. As we await the arrival of the Queen, let's take a look at where it all began. Queen Elizabeth II acceded to the throne 60 years ago, and since then has steered the monarchy through decades of social change while remaining a symbol of national stability in a shifting world. It was in Kenya on February the 6th, 1952, that the Queen heard of her accession, aged just 25. Her coronation took place in June 1953 in Westminster Abbey, where she took her vows to serve the country. During the Queen's 60-year reign, she's undertaken 261 official overseas visits, including state visits to 78 countries. Her interest and gracious manner on these travels has always been met with warmth and enthusiasm.
State visits are an old-fashioned way of travelling about, but I think they still have their point. There does seem to be still a need for people to be seen to be making an effort to go to other countries.
The Queen's official visits have ranged from the Cocos Islands in the Indian Ocean with the smallest population to China with the largest. Many of the monarch's official tours were undertaken on the royal yacht Britannia, and it travelled more than 1 million miles on official royal duties during its service. Sometimes the yacht also enabled her children to tag along. Wherever she went in the world, her lifelong love of horses was recognised, enabling her to continue to enjoy her passion. Her first pony was a Shetland called Peggy, given to her by her grandfather King George V on her 4th birthday. After her father's death, she inherited the royal stud and developed a connoisseur's appreciation of bloodlines. The Queen also owns one of the finest working stables in existence.
All the horses at the Royal Mews are trained to pull the carriages. The Windsor Greys are used for Her Majesty, that's what they're here for. She does have the final say on what carriages we're using and what sort of formations, processions we'll take. So she is, fairly heavily involved, really.
Throughout Her Majesty's life, there have been many constants. One of these is horses, and she continues to ride whenever she can, aged 86. This evening's participants have travelled from all over the world, with 18 nations represented at tonight's pageant. And to show her appreciation, the Queen hosted a royal tea party within the castle, which provided a privileged opportunity for some of this evening's performers to meet her. So with all the world at Windsor, it's time for the show to begin. And as Her Majesty the Queen and His Royal Highness the Duke of Edinburgh arrive, we take a moment to reflect on this historic occasion. Only 2 British monarchs have reached this milestone. Unsurprisingly perhaps to 50% of the population, they're both women. Queen Victoria celebrated her Diamond Jubilee in 1897, and now Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II celebrates hers in 2012. A symbol of stability, she's been an enduring figure in the life of the nation, and her importance has been recognised worldwide by successive leaders. All those taking part tonight have travelled huge distances. For some, it's the first time that they've left their homeland. Why? The reason is simple: the Queen herself. They want to be here for her at this very special moment in time. Our journey begins in Canada. Having flown all the way from Ottawa with 36 horses and accompanied by the vocal quartet The Tenors, it's the Queen's beloved Mounties. Dame Helen Mirren, and from the Americas, the Wild West and the Chilean Huesos. Your Majesty, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our first narrator. She's one of our most respected Oscar-winning actresses. Please welcome Dame Helen Mirren.
months after the coronation in 1953, a marathon program of state visits started with Bermuda and went on to include 11 other countries. That was a taste of things to come. Canada is the country she has visited most during her reign. As head of state, she is always escorted by her beloved mounters. The Queen has visited the Americas on numerous occasions. Occupying over 16 million square miles and stretching from the Arctic to Antarctica, this vast continent comprises North and South America and their associated islands and regions.
Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II has been a regular visitor to the Americas, with Canada playing host 22 times during her 60-year reign.
I have watched with enormous admiration how Canada has grown and matured while remaining true to its history, its distinctive character, and its values.
The royal couple show themselves to the crowd on the steps below the Peace Tower of Parliament buildings before going inside for the official ceremony.
In 1957, Her Majesty created history when she became the first reigning Canadian monarch to officially open Parliament.
Veuillez be seated. Veuillez vous asseoir.
Since then, the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh have visited all the provinces in Canada and been present at countless historic occasions. On her first trip to the United States as Queen, Her Majesty embarked on a 5-day tour that started in New York with an overwhelming reception.
I ask you to rise and drink the health of the President of the United States.
She subsequently embraced the American culture and enjoyed the company of many of the presidents from her reign.
Is that decaffeinated?
No. This is ordinary. This is for the Queen.
In turn, the Americans have embraced the Queen, and she shared in many of the country's special events, including visiting the Liberty Bell on its bicentenary. More recently, she addressed the UN General Assembly for the first time in over half a century.
In tomorrow's world, we must all work together as hard as ever if we are truly to be United Nations.
Down in Central America, the Queen has continued to create history by becoming the first reigning British monarch to visit Mexico. Enthusiastic crowds greeted her wherever she went, including the most famous square in Mexico City, Zocalo, where thousands turned out to create a human flag. Keen to see something special, the royal party took a bus to the ancient ruins of Uxmal, inspecting the pyramids before a banquet in the temple grounds. All went according to plan, until the royal party brought the British weather with them, and the heavens opened. On a 7-day tour of Chile, there was no sign of that British weather.
Santiago, capital city of Chile. The enthusiasm of the crowd was rooted in affection and hospitality. And those two human ingredients were what made the royal tour of Chile such a happy success.
The city's population came out in force to welcome the royal couple, and once the official events were out of the way, the Queen had some time to enjoy one of her greatest passions, horses. All of the Americas are well known for their horsemanship, and Chile certainly didn't disappoint, with this display from the Carabineros. The red carpet has been rolled out many times over the Queen's 60-year reign on her travels to the Americas.
Onwards now to the United States of America. 11 presidents have met and been entertained by the Queen, from Eisenhower to Barack Obama. Each one has had their own special relationship. One of America's most striking images is the Wild West. So what better way to represent the big country? the Wild West Show and performing dueling strings, Abigail Washburn and David Garrett. In 1975, the Queen traveled to Mexico. She arrived in Cozumel on the Yucatan coast, on the peninsula, on the royal yacht Britannia, and was then flown on to Mexico City for the start of a 6-day visit. Please now welcome from Mexico the Delfines Marching Band and the Compañía Tenochtitlan Dancers. In 1968, the Queen undertook a tour of Chile. That one visit to Santiago is fondly remembered by all that were there. And in memory of that, they have flown over 7,000 miles with their horses to be with us tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Chilean Huasos.
Guaso, basta haber nacido en Chile, allá por la cordillera o en un telar de Doñihue. Acorralar el ganado, Vivo enamorada de sus maravillas. Chile, Chile, te llevo en el corazón. Así es de Chile, señores, la tierra de mis amores. Su cordialidad se expande sobre la cima del Andes. ¡Viva Chile!
Coming up from Australasia, the Cook Island Dancers, the New South Wales Mounted Police, and one of its most famous sons, Rolf Harris. Time now to head down under. Here to introduce the acts from Australasia is one of its most famous sons. Please welcome Rolf Harris.
Welcome to Australasia. We might be thousands of miles away from the United Kingdom, but there is incredible affection for the Queen and a strong bond between the royal family and the many nations that occupy this region.
Australasia has an enduring relationship with the Queen. After the coronation, she embarked on her first Commonwealth tour visiting this continent on board the temporary royal yacht, the SS Gothic.
Crossing the Pacific in a ship, which one never does nowadays, was an experience in itself. 3 weeks at sea. I stuck in all the pictures and photographs in my photograph album, which I'd never have done otherwise.
On this trip, the Queen visited the colourful islands of the South Pacific before sailing on to New Zealand and Australia, covering a total distance of 43,618 miles. The first port of call in Australasia was Fiji.
If there really are islands meriting the description of paradise on earth, they must be the Fiji Islands. Now the city was completing its preparations for the visit of Her Majesty and the Duke of Edinburgh.
Back in 1986, Her Majesty was filmed for a television documentary about the Commonwealth and remembers the tour fondly.
It's interesting to see the arrival in Fiji, this marvellous child who appears and does this very grave obeisance. And this chief is bringing a whale's tooth as a gift.
Today, Fiji is still a part of the Commonwealth, but on that first trip, it was a crown colony, with Queen Elizabeth II as the head of state. Back in 1997, Britannia was decommissioned, but not before it had enabled the royal family to sail to islands such as Tuvalu.
These islands are tiny little places and difficult to get to, so that from our point of view, it was just having Britannia made it possible for me to go there and see all these interesting traditions and take part in the feasts.
Nestled halfway between New Zealand and Hawaii are the Cook Islands, which the Queen visited in 1974. International travel was fast developing, and part of the trip was to open the island's airport.
I know that your way of life is something very precious to you all. And I'm confident that you will be able to reap the benefits and avoid the pitfalls of an air link with modern world communications.
These developments in air travel have made it possible for the Queen to make the 12,000-mile journey to New Zealand on 10 occasions during her reign. On her numerous trips, she's travelled extensively across both North and South Islands, experiencing a generous welcome from the locals and a traditional ancestral war cry known as the haka. On occasions, she's even spoken in the local dialect.
Nai tahu, tēnā koutou Katoa.
The Queen has visited every Australian territory during her 16 visits since she first set foot as Queen in Australia at Farm Cove, Sydney in 1954.
Standing at last on Australian soil, how happy I am to be amongst you, and how much I look forward to my journey through Australia.
Since I first stepped ashore here in Sydney in February 1954, I have felt part of this rugged, honest, creative land. I have shared in the joys and the sorrows, the challenges and the changes that have shaped this country's history over these past 50 years. I shall continue faithfully to serve as Queen of Australia under the Constitution to the very best of my ability, as I have tried to do for the last 48 years.
Despite the distance of the Southern Hemisphere, the Queen's made every effort to meet and connect with the people of this extensive and richly varied continent.
Please welcome the New Zealand Army Band. contribution to the sway of the South Pacific. The Cook Islands have a population of only 20,000, but any visitor is guaranteed a warm welcome and a huge, wonderful smile. Please welcome the Cook Island traditional dancers, Kia Orana. Accompanied by the New Zealand Army Band, the New South Wales Mounted Police musical ride. All around. One sing Matilda, one Matilda with me. And he sang as he watched, waited till his billy boiled. You'll come a waltzing Matilda with me. Australasia!
Still to come, Il Divo perform alongside the Italian Carabinieri, and from France, the horse whisperer Jean-François Pignon. Please welcome one of our best-loved actors and consummate horseman, Martin Clunes.
Many barriers have been broken down during the Queen's visits around the world, and she's often confirmed her intent to reach out on seemingly contentious issues. In 1961, she met Pope John XXIII on a state visit to the Vatican.
The Queen and her family embody European history. The descendants of her great-great-grandmother, Queen Victoria, are prevalent throughout most of Europe's royal courts, and she herself is married to a prince of Denmark and Greece, Prince Philip. In the early days of their marriage, the Queen and Prince Philip forged a strong connection with Malta. They lived on the island for 2 years, while Prince Philip was stationed there as a first lieutenant in the Navy. Perhaps their only taste of a relatively normal life. In the years that have followed, the royal couple have returned to Malta on many occasions for formal state visits, public appearances, and a chance to recapture the happiest of times. In 1961, on her first visit to Italy as Queen, she met Pope John XXIII, and in line with Vatican protocol, arrived in a long black taffeta gown, a tradition for Protestant monarchs. In 1994, the Queen made a groundbreaking trip to Russia by being the first reigning monarch to visit since the assassination of Tsar Nicholas II, the Queen's distant cousin. She was taken to the newly restored Catherine Palace, and it was there that the Queen was able to view gifts given by her great-grandfather, Edward VII, to the Tsar. The visit to the palace ended with a curious display of daylight fireworks, the whole experience helping to thaw what was previously a more frosty relationship with Russia. The Queen, a fluent French speaker, cemented Britain's relationship with France on a state visit in 1957, an association that remains part of both our histories. The Anglo-French bond was never stronger than when thousands of Allied troops began landing on the beaches of Normandy in 1944. On the 50th anniversary of the D-Day landings, the Queen joined President Mitterrand and war veterans in an act of remembrance.
Old adversaries are now reconciled, but the Europe which we know today could not exist had not the tide of war been turned here in Normandy 50 years ago. Veterans of the Normandy campaign, you deserve your nation's thanks.
Of all the visits Her Majesty has made, her recent trip to the Republic of Ireland stands out as one of the most historic. The Queen fulfilled a lifelong ambition as the first monarch to set foot on Irish soil since it gained independence in 1922.
Prince Philip and I are delighted to be here and to experience at first hand Ireland's world-famous hospitality. Together, we have much to celebrate. The ties between our people, the shared values, and the economic, business and cultural links that make us so much more than just neighbours.
The visit posed an enormous diplomatic challenge, but nonetheless, it proved to be a huge success.
To all those who have suffered as a consequence of our troubled past, I extend my sincere thoughts and deep sympathy.
When Her Majesty spoke Gaelic at the state banquet,
Agus Acoisa.
the simple words of reconciliation could not have been more effective. The Queen has travelled extensively all over Europe, and has clocked up a staggering 45 state visits to over half of the 50 countries that make up this remarkable multicultural continent. Some 10 monarchs remain today in Europe, but Queen Elizabeth II is by far the most well-known and the most widely travelled.
The Queen has seen this next equine display in the glorious surroundings of the Villa Borghese Gardens in Rome, but never in this country. That's about to change. Please welcome to the arena the Italian Carrossella de Carabinieri, and performing Caruso on the stage, a truly international act, Il Divo.
Dove il mare luccica e tira forte il vento sulla vecchia terrazza davanti al golfo di Sorrento. Un uomo abbraccia una ragazza dopo che aveva pianto, poi si schiarisce la voce e ricomincia il canto. Voglio bene assai, ma tanto bene sai, io non la terra ormai, e solo io sangue di te bene sai. Vedi le luci in mezzo al mare, mezzo alle notti là, in America, ma erano solo le lampade e la bianca scia di un'elica. Guarda negli occhi la ragazza, quegli occhi verdi come il mare, poi all'improvviso si la lacrima e lui credette via affogare.
We now travel to France, where the Queen has met every president since her first state visit in 1957 to meet René Coté. Please welcome the graceful and hugely talented French horse whisperer, Jean-François Pignon. In 1994, the Queen made yet another historic visit. This time it was to Russia to be greeted by Boris Yeltsin. The Berlin Wall was down and the Queen started the process of re-establishing our relationship with this vast and beautiful country. Please welcome the Kremlin Mounted Display Cossacks and the Russian Cossack State Dance Group. At the far side of the continent is Azerbaijan, bordered by 7 countries, including Turkey, Russia, Georgia, and Iran. It has a rich and varied culture. It is also home to some wonderful and ancient horse breeds, including the Golden Horse. One of these Karabakh horses was presented to the Queen in 1956, and we are delighted to have them here today. Ladies and gentlemen, the Azerbaijani dancers and the Karabakh horses.
Coming up, from Africa, the Watoto Children's Choir, the Kenyan Tribes, and the cast of Disney's The Lion King.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome one of the country's most popular actresses, Freema Agyeman.
The Queen has visited Africa on many, many occasions and been a guest in 22 countries. In February 1952, the Queen was told at treetops in Kenya that her father had died. The Kenyans still remark that a princess went up a tree and a queen came down.
The Queen's relationship with the continent of Africa runs deep. When she was crowned, she became head of state to some 10 colonies, all of which have since gained independence. As head of the Commonwealth, she's continued to travel extensively throughout the 19 African countries that are part of the organisation which remains a major force for change in the world today.
Once more in Africa we cry, welcome the Queen. Once more, because it was here that she became Queen, and Africans were the first of her subjects to greet her as such.
The Queen returned to Kenya in 1972, the first visit since her father's death some 20 years earlier. It was while she was staying in Kenya that the news of King George VI's sudden death was announced. The Queen and Prince Philip were on holiday at Treetops and about to embark on a Commonwealth tour. The couple cut short their trip and returned home. It wasn't until 1983 that she was able to return to the Aberdare Mountains to revisit Treetops, the game lodge where her reign began. The original lodge has since burnt down, but the memories of those times remain deeply personal to the Queen.